Welcome, everybody, to NetApp On Air. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nick Howell, and very excited to have you guys here today. I'm very excited to talk about today's topic. Before we get into that, though, make sure you're subscribed here to the channel on YouTube, follow us on Twitch, and make sure you're following us across all the socials. But most importantly, make sure you get into our Discord community. It is our verified official presence on Discord. It is our real-time arm, as Drew and I like to call it, of the larger NetApp community. We've got over 100 members of technical, executive, and support staff there ready to answer your questions, whatever you may have, and all of our friends and peers and everything that love NetApp hang out in our Discord community. So make sure you get in there, make sure you join us, and make sure you get subscribed to all of the episodes of NetApp On Air here on YouTube. My guest today is an interesting one. It's one that really hits home for me because, well, I took an extended leave over the holidays break, and I played with this little thing called ChatGPT. But we're going to talk about ChatGPT a lot. I spent a lot of time with that. But NetApp has been in this AI game for quite some time now. We've been doing artificial intelligence, machine learning, training and modeling, all kinds of things for some of our biggest customers. And some of our biggest hardware architectures to date that I can even think of are around some of our partner solutions that we have with folks like NVIDIA. So we're going to talk about all of those things today. So grab a fresh drink, strap in, have a good time, because I got to get my guest on here and introduce him. Let me get this music turned off, and there we go. My guest today is someone I met when I came back, I believe it was in 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. And he just wowed me with his presence and his ability to speak to some of these complex topics that I was having a hard time wrapping my head around. And I'm just going to bring him up on. Welcome to the show, Hoseb Dermanilian. I hope I said that correctly.
Oh, you did great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for being willing to join me and be a part of NetApp On Air here, because I think there's a lot of people that could find value and information from some of the things we're going to talk about today. So how do we kick this off as far as you? Let's hear about you first before we get into some of the topics of AI. How did you find your way into NetApp?
Very interesting. Actually, so I'm based in Denver, Colorado now. I've been with NetApp for almost 9.5 years. I actually started with NetApp all the way in Saudi Arabia, if you ever think about that.
Wow.
As a systems engineer, I was working for a project where NetApp was one of the bidders to the project. And I met friends over there that they had an opening for a systems engineer. So I'm grateful to that opportunity that they have given to me. Some of them are still with NetApp, some of them are left. But that opened a very big, beautiful door for me to join this great company and great culture. And I moved from being an SE into the consulting SE. Then I moved to Dubai, so I started covering NetApp for Dubai, and then I started getting engaged. So historically, I was in the surveillance business, video surveillance, cameras, and even we were using some sort of AI in those days in 2012, but it wasn't called
like
AI.
face recognition and stuff
Correct.
like that was starting to come in. Yeah.
Correct. And then so what happened is, after like 2 years of being a systems engineer, we figured out that, hey, this is a great business especially for the Middle East region. They were building airports, they were building a lot of infrastructure that they needed surveillance, and actually we drove a quite good business on that piece with our E-Series, as you know, at that time. And from there, it merged with the big data topic as well, because it was all about facial recognition. It was all about identifying if someone left a suitcase in the middle of the airport and walked away, and how can we identify those. And then during those times in 2015, it was also the rise of Hadoop and the big data, the terminologies. So at that time, my manager proposed, hey, how can we expand NetApp's business into this space, especially like Splunk was coming up and all that. So I started forming a team of experts within NetApp in Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. And we started forming alliances and relationships, and started looking at because this all related to data, right? From those days, even the surveillance.
Well, there was this explosion of analytics that happened.
And AI and data.
Yeah.
So, we started forming a good alliance with Splunk at that time, with the Hadoop players, with MongoDB at some point in time as well, right? And that's how it started. And I got into this big data analytics business. I loved it because it was all about the data, how we can make use of the data. What happened is, and I have a master's degree in computer science, so my background also helped me in that because I did an algorithm that did a voice over IP security in a better way, and I used some of the machine learning, not as advanced as it was today. I mean, we didn't have much GPUs at the university time in those days, but in 2017 or half of the 16, I want to be careful. NVIDIA put out the DGX-1 at that time, and as AI started becoming a hot topic, right? So again, we looked around, and I've always been a person looking around at new opportunities and how can we grow NetApp's business in those new areas, right? I'm a person that I like to build from scratch. So we looked at that, and we were a couple of folks within the company. Again, some of them are still around, some of them have pursued other opportunities. We sat down together and we said, well, this is going to be the future. I mean, we looked at the DGX-1. It was tremendously amazing on what the capabilities they were doing. And as a matter of fact, we even had customers started looking at that, right?
What were they looking to solve? Like, what was the nail that the hammer was looking for?
Our first customer in Europe at that time was a big hospital research group.
Okay.
We started with mostly in healthcare in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also in APAC region, there was the automotive guys. So autonomous driving and healthcare were the very first adopters, if you would like, okay, let's look at these GPUs. They're helping us, fine-tune our models. They're helping us, define a new way of identifying different X-ray machines. I mean, one of the use cases that this healthcare people in Europe were doing is actually doing generative, what we're doing in ChatGPT. They're doing generative AI. They actually were generating MRI images of the heart, of the brain, and saying, hey, can you identify which one is machine generated, which one is human generated? They were trying to create those generative models to output images to help the doctors look at the differences or make them identify the differences. One of the use cases also they were using is on the heart side and the heart surgeries. If there are ways we can identify a use case where we can avoid people going through a bypass or through some of the heart surgeries without going invasive, and help them identify that beforehand. So all these use cases came, and still it was premature. I could tell, right? Like people didn't have, I'm going to drink coffee, I need water. They were like, let's see how this is going to make coffee from water, right? But DGX was powerful, the messaging was powerful, and everyone loved the idea of accelerating their research. That was the motto. If you look at the one sentence that NVIDIA said at that time, we want to cut researchers' time from days and even months of running algorithms and running trainings and all that into seconds, minutes, and days. So that caught the attention because, again, we didn't have the compute power needed, and we didn't have much of the resources on the ground. Like we didn't have as much as data scientists that we have today back in 2016. So it was really targeted. And the use cases, as I said, autonomous driving was very big. Tesla was coming up and everyone wanted to do the kind of autopilot and stuff. And by that, when NVIDIA came up with DGX-1, we sat down a group of people. Imagine the buyers in 2016 were cardiologists. So at some point in time, we were sitting with a cardiologist explaining what a CIFS is, what NFS is, what SMB is. It's fascinating because, and the competition is nice. We had competitors out there. We had different vendors coming in to the same project. And if you go to the cardiologist and say, hey, I can do all protocols, I can do CIFS, NFS, and SMB, and they come to you and ask you, do you guys do CIFS, NFS, and SMB? I'm like, let me explain to you. You don't need CIFS and SMB here. You need NFS, and this is why. So it was really fascinating during those days to go through this. But obviously, very smart people. They understand that the challenges at that time too. The budgets were held or were held by those people at those times.
Yeah.
So we came together, a group of people, and said this is going to be a great market, and AI is fueled by data. That's literally you
Well,
can't do it.
let's jump in right there, because that's an interesting. I think some of the time frames that you outlined there, as someone who was kind of in that era in a different vector, a different space, we were in the heart of like everybody trying to virtualize everything at that time, early 2010s, like 2010 to 2015 was like the heart of the virtualization era. So systems admins and people that manage data centers and stuff like that were deep in the throes of turning their entire infrastructure on its head, and we were looking at ways of leveraging automation and orchestration.
Correct.
Meanwhile, at the same time, in parallel, all of this data was being generated. All of these analytics were being generated, and I would argue that a lot of the beginnings of AI happened with just simple business intelligence, trying to take all of this data and ball it up into something that you could hand to a board or an executive and turn data into information, is what I used to say. Like,
correct.
Have decision points made by machines based on data rather than some executive just kind of finger in the wind. Let's go that way. There was a basis behind it.
You're absolutely right. You're spot on. I mean, the AI didn't start with the DGX, or didn't even start with the GPUs. Right. AI, and especially the machine learning. And we're going to talk more about this because, AI is the big term. And now with the ChatGPT, I heard Sam Altman multiple times, and I love his keynotes. One of the things that he's saying, which is great, is like, be careful. Everyone is going to tell now I do AI. I mean, Nick, you and I are doing AI now with this video. I mean, people will start, kind of putting AI into their every single thing because it's the buzzword now. And he was true saying sometimes it's scary to be the biggest buzzword out there because the water gets muddy so easily. So underneath AI, there was machine learning and deep learning. In the past, I mean, even in my research at the university, I use machine learning. There was the rule-based AI, which is rule-based machine learning. And you say, if the data has this and has that, then go this. Classification and all the things were from 1950s and above, right? I mean,
so where does generative and natural language processing come into the picture? Because I think that's where the buzz is right now with ChatGPT.
Now, let me tell you, if we're going to the ChatGPT, if you ask me, are you surprised at what's happening? No, 4 or 5 years ago, we were speaking about this. People think we were crazy. And when we said it's going to be generative AI, I'm not surprised at all. I'm not even surprised on what they're saying it's going to happen in years from now. We can't predict what's going to happen 100 years from now, but I think all this was in the works.
Yeah.
A lot of things was in the works, but it wasn't out there in the public, and it wasn't put in a very, what happened is they put the technology in a consumable way.
True.
And when you do that, everyone starts talking about it. Historically, we had language models trained. I mean, the simple translation you do on Google is based on natural language processing, natural language understanding, right?
Yeah.
We have had, generative text generation in the past too. I mean, BERT and all the different, language models that was trained. But what was missing is putting it into the hands of the consumer this way.
Short of like voice to text or something like that on your phone. Like that's about the only way that we really saw it manifest as end users. Yeah.
I mean, you do a facial recognition on your phone. How long you've been doing that? Probably past 3-4 years. That's inferencing. That's AI. Yeah. That's, it's not generative form, but it's AI, right? So all of that was there. The rule-based machine learning was there and still there. But what's happening with ChatGPT now is, again, they made it two things. The GPT-3 was trained in 2021. What happened is they made it more interactive. How many times you call the bank and you say agent. You want to talk to a person still, right? Yeah. I mean, those chat bots were all machine learning, but what was missing in them was the interactive piece, which is what ChatGPT added, where you can have a conversation. So historically, and that moves me into, and let's unfold this a little bit, right? Because people need to understand, well, then what was different in the past and what's happening now? So what transformer models that came in 2017. It's called transformer models, and actually Google researchers was the one. It's so funny how this industry works, right? Like Google was the one who did the research in 2017 on these transformer models, and they came up with this terminology of transformer models. But now Microsoft is the one who bought, OpenAI and
You mentioned Google.
yeah,
So fun story for me for a second. They made an acquisition of a company called DeepMind about 10 years ago,
correct,
which
AlphaFold.
which nobody had really heard of, but I ran across them randomly because they were teaching AIs to play StarCraft, and I'm a big gamer. I love StarCraft, and I'm sitting there going, isn't that the quickest way to get to Skynet is start teaching a real time strategy space war game
Right.
to an AI community? But anyway, that wasn't even the scariest part. Once Google acquired them, there was a project that came along that I think that eventually became Google Brain, which is the current what they're doing. But they created Google Brain, and then they decided to do a second one. The two brains developed their own language to talk to each other, which was fascinating in and of itself, right? So then they were like, let's add a third one to the picture and see what happens. So instead of the first two communicating with the third one, the first two decided to start encrypting their communications to lock out the third one. And I remember that being an inflection point for me with AI, where I went, oh crap. Like it can write its own language, it can form its own communication, it can fence and guardrail who can participate in those communications, and we're teaching it to play StarCraft? like, and now I hear and we've seen the rise of automation and robotics in manufacturing, and in some of the simplest ways. That's where I start asking questions. Where does it's fine for generative to help us in our daily life, whether it's voice to text or whether it's getting a recipe or writing a rap song. Like all of that is cute, but where does this get from cute to
Scary.
Powerful to scary?
Again, I'm gonna refer a lot to Sam Altman because one of the interviews he had, he talks about alignment. Are we aligned with what we are creating? Are we aligned that what we are creating is gonna help us and gonna be aligned with what with our needs, or it's gonna turn into aliens like we see it in the sci-fi movies? They have that fear, and he said we can't control that on a scale, in 100 years, but today we are able to control. So if you look at the GPT-4 and what they did with that, they put guardrails. They want to be able to tell the machine, hey, don't be a racist. And the machine will come back and say, okay, I'm not going to be racist, because they want the machine to understand what we want rather than them learning on their own, because this could go different ways, right? And he identifies, he acknowledges that, and he's not saying, hey, it's not going to happen.
We don't need the generative AIs to have access to social media.
Well, by the way, Twitter blocked access.
I bet.
I don't know, because, Elon said, hey, you're not anymore a nonprofit. You got to pay for the data. So if you look at it, there's still a lot of work to be done in that field. But you mentioned the different. Listen, in the past 5 years, I've been into customer meetings where projects were about flying cars, flying taxis, flying stuff. But here's what OpenAI did. They actually scaled the use case and brought it into production.
Yeah.
The rest is still in the research labs, and it's to the level of the people who built it. They understand how it works. But what OpenAI did, and this will accelerate other people putting all the hard work that has been in the works in the past 4 years. People will come and say, well, Nick, what happened to your project you've been working on in the past 4 years? Right? Like, I think this is going to help a lot of other use cases come into the consumer, and they're going to start calling it out specifically that this is AI, right?
Yeah.
They're going to call it specifically that I'm using AI. I wonder if Apple tomorrow will come and highlight all the AI features they have on the iPhone that you didn't know it was based on AI.
Well, they've been calling it the neural engine, or you've heard of neural networks.
Right.
Like, I think a lot of that is going to sort of get lumped under that umbrella. of kind of AI. Like you're saying, it's AI is more of an umbrella. It's not a thing specifically, and Apple's been doing that for at least 5 years that I can remember.
Correct. There's a lot, and actually, GPT was trained on the largest fifth supercomputer. So we have those infrastructures built already. Like, it wasn't like in the past 6-7 years, the work we've been doing has been enabling all this different. And by the way, there are a lot of use cases with our customers, especially in the healthcare industry, that it's not out public, but we know what they're doing and we know that they have been leveraging it. Now, what we need is more adoption from the physicians, from the doctors, from the other people to understand that if you do AI, you will be like, let me give you an example, right? We've seen the GPT-4. Now they're doing the multimodal, including the generative or explaining what an image is. And I was talking to you about this. If I am a radiologist and I get to read 20 MRI images a day, okay, today with my eyes, with my brain, with my stuff, and I am a patient and I wait 4 days for my MRI results to come back, what if they put into the GPT-4 the image and ask the machine, what do you see in this image?
It could do thousands and millions of those a day.
Exact. Now, you still need the physician to go through it. I still believe that radiologists are going to be needing to verify what GPT or any other tool that is returning. But now, instead of 20, you can just read and verify it and say, yeah, that's it. And instead of 20, you can do 30, 40. And me, for waiting 4 days, I can wait for a day or two now. And then, which means if there is something serious, then that 4 day cuts down to the flywheel effect that comes into the play after.
What you just described is happening across the board.
It is.
We're hearing a lot of fear-mongering around, kids, quote-unquote, cheating in school by using GPT to write their papers, marketing people, writing copy, and, doing programs and stuff like that by using GPT. What was the other one? Code developers using it to write their code for them.
SAT.
I don't think that is... I think there's going to be a little bit of that as a novelty in the beginning, but I think where we're going to see that, I feel like you and I talked about this at some point before, where we're going to go from developers to almost like prompt engineers, where they're going to play a middleman role between the generative engine and the delivery, and there'll be this point of kind of verification and cleanup and curators of sorts. But I think one of the biggest industries that are going to spawn out of this generative movement is going to be prompt engineering, or information engineering, something like that. Information scientist, I think, is what info scientist or something like that. So not data science, but like info science, people that can't code, but they can prompt. And I think there's going to be this new vector that's going to arrive in the industry, or a new job role that's going to pop up that will be centered around just writing prompts and being able to know how to interact properly with generative AIs.
Correct. 2 points on that one. I think AI will not replace jobs. It will create new jobs, as you said.
Agreed.
Second thing is, which I am very excited about this, our systems, including the educational system, needs an upgrade. Right? So if people going to use now ChatGPT to find answers to the questions that have been put 20 years ago or 10 years ago, then the whole educational system needs an update to adapt to our intelligence. And I think I'm looking at that very promisingly, because this will let people think more creatively. Okay, you know what? How can we? They're not going to. You can block ChatGPT as much as you want.
Yeah.
People will still find a way. They need to find a different way to overcome the intelligence. And I think it's very interesting, right? This is really, this is I would say a competition between human intelligence and the computer intelligence, right? So what can we do that the ChatGPT cannot answer? Like maybe do more creative homeworks where ChatGPT cannot figure it out yet.
Yeah.
So that is going to update the whole system, not only educational, a lot of different things, right? It will let people think differently.
Drew just nailed it with a comment in the chat here. Thank you, Drew, for that analogy, because I lived through that myself. I remember when there were classes where certain calculators were allowed and not allowed, whether it was AP calculus or whether it's something along those, like there were certain places where I couldn't bring a calculator. Why?
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 And let me tell you, I had two educational systems in different countries. In my 5 years engineering studies, there was no concept of open book exam. Right. I went into my master's degree and there was an open book exam and I failed because I didn't know how it worked. I was programmed to pass an exam without a book. And that made me learn how an open book exam works. Right now, this is very similar to getting into that next level of systems and educational and all that. It's Elon tweeted today. I was reading in the morning. He said, "What's left for us as humans?" He's like, and he's preaching his Neuralink now.
Neuralink,
which I believe it's going to happen.
Well, I've kept a very close eye on because from an early, like I was obsessed with Terminator and that whole concept early in the. I do think at some point we've seen evolutions of technology move from starting with putting a level of technology unseen elsewhere in our pockets to things like Google Glass. I do think that there will be something at some point that interacts directly with our retinas or retinal nerve where we will have a heads-up display in our line of sight.
Yeah.
And Neuralink being able to attach to the brain like that, I know it has healthcare implications to solve problems that are dealt with the brain, but I think the more that we look at Google Brain, the Project Google Brain, we've got the China, Europe, everybody, US, all have initiatives around mapping the neurons of the brain.
These are the things There are a lot of things that we don't know. And
exactly.
Going on. Actually, to that topic, I recommend people to read a book called 1,000 Brains. It's very, very eye-opener. It talks about the neocortex and how it works and how robotics need that. But yeah, man, again, what's going on? And back to the transformer models, before I forget, historically, we still had natural language processing, but what the neural networks were doing in the past it's the feed forward where, the meaning of the word was dependent on the word before it and after it, right? So you couldn't have put a big sentence and give a context into it. What transformer models did is give a context. They would, in parallel, analyze the words in a sentence and give it a meaning. So that changed the whole concept of natural language processing, natural language understanding, and after that, generative AI came into the play. And that's the transformer model is actually, and it has billions of parameters, and that is what we're going to see in the future. I don't think we will. GPT required ton of watt power and ton of like GPUs to train the model on. The two things that is missing is actually one is the learning by itself. So for example, and I think that's what they are heading to in the next, if you ask a question that the ChatGPT didn't know, you ask them again tomorrow, it will not know again. But if the self-learning, I think the machine will ask you, well, tell me more, Nick, about this person that you're asking. So they will keep learning by themselves. But that comes into the fear of then turning these machines into somewhere that we don't want them to go.
Does this turn into a sort of Minority Report situation where with ubiquitous access to data, we have any information that we want to, for those, a great book, great movie by Tom Cruise, or with Tom Cruise in it.
Yeah.
So his ability to just find any information on any person at any time, like we're pretty close to that already. Like Instant Checkmate, all these websites that do that, you can find just about anything you want on anybody. What's stopping us from sort of unlocking that dam completely and just letting everybody have, including the generative AIs, have ubiquitous access to all of the data of the world? Would that generate more problems than solutions?
I think sometimes they needs to be guards around what I think that's one of the things that there is guards around that. Because I'm sure there are agencies and other places that they already have this, but opening that to the public might, they will need to see the consequences right now. I'm not fully sure, and all this, like European committee is coming up with the AI ethics, the US government is working on AI ethics and all that, and I think that is very important because there will be guards around what we can put out there to the use of the public before we make sure, as Sam was saying, it's the alignment. If it's aligned to our needs, what people can use of this, right?
Yeah.
Can make use of this. So
yeah. There was a great point brought up in chat. I want to throw it up here, and I think that's a great segue into showing some of the presentation materials you brought today, because I do want to spend the second half of the show talking about what we are doing specifically at NetApp and how we brought it. So, Boxman, thanks for the point here. Waits for the day when we can actually run this stuff locally. Lots of businesses still cannot fully utilize these tools due to this. It's a great cue. So I'm going to pull your deck up here, Hoseb, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Step through some of these solutions that we've been doing now for at least several years with some of our bigger customers that are taking advantage of some of this stuff.
Right.
I personally geek out over hardware. I love some of the SuperPod stuff we're going to showcase in a little bit. But yeah, take it away.
Well, Boxman, great. Even if you have it remotely, Nick and I were trying to access ChatGPT right before this,
Yep.
Live, and it was overloaded. So even if it is remote, there's still a lot of limitations around it that we want to make people have access to it, and that comes actually with the. There are two things. Economy helps because, again, if economy is going well, and that's what we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, people had the appetite to look at, okay, how can I upgrade my systems, my infrastructure into adopting these new technologies, versus what we are seeing nowadays is what are my top 2-3 priorities that I want to spend my money on from an infrastructure and IT perspective. So hopefully the economy will help us get into, and also, all these use cases where people can prioritize that. But, looking back at what NetApp has been doing in the past 4 or 5 years, we have won multiple industry awards. And I want to clarify one thing. And first of all, I'm not a data scientist, and I'm not claiming to be one, out of respect for every person who have studied very hard to become a data scientist. And I would appreciate everyone out there in the field as a human beings, not claim being a doctor or if you're not a doctor,
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, NetApp hasn't been, generating algorithms or we haven't been selling AI algorithms or AI models. We are actually helping with our still specialized storage management systems, whether it's on premises or in the cloud, helping people who are working hard to do these algorithms, make their life easier, help them do these algorithms. Right? I want to clarify those two, because a lot of the times, people come and, say, hey, you guys, you're saying you're selling AI solutions, but you are not. Actually, we are part of the AI solution.
Yeah.
So I want to clarify those 2 points. And we have won multiple awards because of our, our ability to help people do AI and accelerate AI. We've been, we've been a fabulous partner to NVIDIA, and we are continue to be one of their partners in this market. We have actually adopted more than 330 worldwide customers who are doing some sort of AI projects in our using data sitting on NetApp. Let me put it that way, very straightforward. And we have been growing this business year over year. And I'm going to tell you the industries that we have been like accelerating. As we mentioned, Nick and I was speaking at the beginning 4 years ago. Automotive was actually the pivotal into all of the other industries to use AI. And one of our very first wins we're in the automotive industry. Then we have seen a very big uptake in healthcare sector, and still it's one of the growing, and actually it's one of the dearest to my heart as well, as a person who lost a dear family member because people couldn't diagnose her earlier. And if we use the technology for this purpose, it's really an area that I would love to spend a lot of time in there personally. So healthcare has been really growing. And, you're probably asking me, so are we seeing any of those benefits? To be honest with you, we are, but you are not aware of those. It's still happening in the background. You get the MRI report, and I'm sure not all the hospitals, not all the facilities, not all the providers are using it, but some of them are really, if you go out on Google and search for it, you'll find a lot of use cases, and you'll be surprised that, again, as you're using your face recognition on your phone, you'll be seeing the MRI results, but there will be some sort of AI at the back of that.
Retail probably has the most implications for the average end user.
Correct.
Anytime you get recommendations for a
Correct.
product, or Amazon tells you that this product pairs with these other two things, YouTube recommends you a video. All of those things are
Netflix, right? It's a big
right. Netflix and exactly. So you hear algorithm all the time. A lot of that has to do with models, behavioral learnings, and algorithmic recommendation engines that are based on some principles of AI. So
correct,
yeah,
and that's the retail use case. Then in the past 2 years, we have seen a lot of public sector interest in this as well, because again, it becomes, it becomes like who does better in this, and obviously there are a lot of use cases that we are also, helping on that front. So
dun, dun, dun,
if you
dun, dun.
ask,
Dun, dun, dun,
yeah,
dun, dun.
dun-dun,
Sorry.
dun-dun. If you're asking me, Nick, you'll understand better. If you're asking me, like, what are the top 4 challenges that you guys see when you talk to customers, right? They want to do AI, and a lot of these challenges relate to what are the things that I talked about in the past. Our complexity is one thing, and it's been one of the also growing things, because you mentioned when this all came up in 2016-17, a lot of IT folks were busy on migrating to the cloud, and you can
Yeah.
learn as much as possible in a day, right? A lot of people were still getting their cloud certificates. VMware was making a big jump to the cloud as well, and et cetera, virtualization, and containers came. A lot of people were busy with that, so that's why projects were staying still outside of the IT. Now, and that's what the shadow AI, shadow IT was a problem for us, right? Again, uh, you know, IT people were waking up and saying, "Oh my God, my data is somewhere that I don't know where it is." And this group of people are doing a lot of great things, but it doesn't follow our standards. It doesn't follow our, policies, et cetera, et cetera. Especially with the ease of cloud use, you don't need to be an IT person to go out and rent a couple of GPUs, move the data into the container out there, and then start doing AI work. But that wasn't making the CDOs and CIOs happy.
Yeah.
So that was another, and there was a battle, right? And these people were saying, "Well, cancel that project. It's better than doing it, because I don't want to have any problem in losing data. That's going to cost us a lot, and that's going to make us look bad and all that." So there were this battle that was not helping people who are coming up with these creative ideas, and that was because of the shadow AI, and IT. Complexity is another thing, because this is not your traditional SQL. This is not your traditional workload that you have been living and breathing and with it for the past 20 years. This is a different beast. It has its own requirements, and it has its own software tools on top. So the uncertainty and the difficulty of DIYing it was bringing a lot of complexity to the picture.
Yep.
I want to focus on the scaling AI projects. A lot of great work stayed in the scope of 30 patients and one doctor, and it never grew beyond that. Why? Because multiple things, and I want to unpack those because it's very important. First, the data. They had a very small data set. They could train their models on a small data set, but then again, when opening up to the public, it was breaking up. The second thing is people didn't want to share the data. Now you're going to say, "Well, Hoseb, we've been storing petabytes and exabytes of data. Why we don't have the data?" It's not a matter of we don't have the data, it's sharing the data. Believe it or not, departments within the same company don't share data with each other. And we have seen this in retail industry, we've seen this in healthcare industry. The reason for that is a couple of things. First off, it's their own data. They have been collecting it. They want to protect it. Second is they don't want to lose that data, and they don't want to copy that data over and over again. So that was another problem. And what happens is then this small group of people will just give up and say, "Well, let's move on to the next prototype." So there was a big challenge with the scaling AI project. Also, infrastructure, the cost of compute was another problem if to scale these projects, right? And how many people will have access to the supercomputer that OpenAI had in the past, right? They were
Well, I
not.
definitely want to spend some time on those as well, because of our insanely technical audience. The architectures and the hardware and the stuff like that, not so much the philosophical approaches to it, Is there, so when you say that what were you saying? They didn't have the hardware to do it, to be able to do some of this stuff? What were you implying by that?
Three things. GPUs are power consuming, and a
Right.
lot of data centers today didn't have the ability to build supercomputers in there. Also, GPUs, if you look at it, it's not the same TCO if you compare it with the CPUs in the past. So if you want to invest in this, there were some trade-offs, and also, people didn't want to build this large infrastructures, or not even start small with, because again, there's a lot of governance around IT data centers nowadays. So that's when I say they didn't have access to this, to do it at a scale. They had small infrastructures that were able to help them to do a POC type, to do again on a small 30 patient. Now, don't confuse. We have a lot of customers who invested and they're up and running. We have actually customers who have 20 DGXs and above, hundreds of GPUs that they use. But there's still a large cohort of people who implemented this on a small scale and were afraid to move on to the next level, because of multiple reasons. And the economy didn't help, and then the COVID didn't help, and all that, right? But I'm going to come into what solutions we have for that, right?
Yeah,
How can we help that? So let's then move to the solutions, right? So how can NetApp help in these challenges? And by the way, outside of these 4 challenges, there are a ton of other challenges that related to AI work today. There's the ethics, there's the bias, there's the lack of data science resources, a lot of things, right? I am really focusing on the ones that us as NetApp, as a specialist, can help our customers, and this is where we see in our conversations with our customers. The first and foremost, when I am able to provide more data to data science teams, whether it's data from the different departments or data from a different company, and help them get access to that data, I'm helping them to get more accurate data model, or more accurate AI models. Because the more data, the better the data. Again, clean data, of course, cleans data. The better your models, the better accuracy at. If you think about it, with the Chat GPT, they couldn't have reached all this accuracy if they didn't have access data from Wikipedia, from Twitter, from all the different things, right? If they trained this model on a chat that you and I had, Nick, it wasn't going to be successful.
Yeah.
So if I'm giving access, if NetApp is helping data, and we do that today. We have a customer with 500 data scientists. We gave them access to the data in a matter of seconds, as we're going to see, compared to hours of them spending on different systematic problems, copying the data across the wire, putting it on USB sticks sometimes, which is insane. So we're bringing, I like this terminology, I say bringing data closer to the data scientists, because that's what they need. Even if they have the biggest infrastructure in the world, they don't have the data, their work is useless.
I think everybody agrees on that. But how do we accomplish that? How do we help people get there with some of our solutions and architectures, though?
I'll cover, if you guys wait 5 minutes,
Okay.
we'll come into that. The second is hybrid cloud AI training, and this is very important, and we see a growing need for this. A lot of AI projects start in the cloud as a POC, and then they grow, they scale, and now they have data on premises that they want to connect to that infrastructure in the cloud. So NetApp, with our data fabric, we help, and I will show the diagram. We help connect the 2 data sources together in one seamless, and with BlueXP, that is making a lot of sense with a lot of customers. Third is collaboration, reproducibility, and traceability. A lot of you on the call today who know that NetApp has cloning, snapshots, and replication. We applied those into data science workloads, meaning if I'm able to clone the same data set 10 times, then the 10 data scientists have access to that 10 data sets as one data set, as one cost, et cetera, and they are now able to collaborate that work amongst each other. Historically, they used to copy that data. Reproducibility is a terminology used in the data science world, where if I have a model today that lets this car drive on its own, if that model was trained a year ago, how do I go back to that model? That model was trained on 2 things, the code and the data. We can retrieve the code, but how do we retrieve the data? So when we clone and snapshot and put this together with the code aside, I can come back after 5, 6, 7 years, reproduce that model, bring back the data, attach it to the code with one click, And all this is happening in Jupyter notebooks, by the way. That is what is catching the attention of our customers. And last piece is faster ROI, reduced TCO. That's well known. But how do we do it, right? So, we like this slide to show our vision in terms of building the data fabric between the core and the cloud mainly. In the core, you have all this data sitting on premises from different sources. And in the cloud, the data is growing over there. A lot of people, especially in the past 5 years, if you look at it, the new income data with the new data sets of the data is stored in the cloud. The old data sets of the SQL and the Oracles and the others is sitting on premises. Whereas if someone created a 3 year ago a customer survey link where all the surveys are uploaded, the data is in the cloud. And you can't do AI if you don't combine all these different data sets together. So if you have the data sitting on a CVO, if you have the data sitting on the ANF, if you have the data sitting on the FSX, and guess what? With BlueXP, you can just take one line dot from your on-premises storage and sync it with the CVO, FSXN, or ANF, whatever you want.
And the point is that that's the same fundamental concepts that we've been doing for decades. It's Snap Mirror at the end of the day, right?
So Nick, what we did is we hired data scientists 5 years ago. We hired 5 of them coming out of data science, not knowing nothing.
Never touched ONTAP or storage array.
ONTAP, never touched storage. They knew some about S3 object because that's what they used in the cloud. Sure. And we put them in a room. We said, go and study this thing called ONTAP and let us know what are the features that would help you with your work and what were you struggling with. They came up with said, well, cloning is number one. If
Flex clone and Snap Mirror, probably.
Yeah, Flex clone, Snap Mirror, snapshot. And they didn't even say, oh, the shot thing, that's a snapshot.
Yeah.
So
the shot thing, I'm going to use that.
And then we just rebrand. I wouldn't call it rebranded. Marketing will just jump off their chairs. We used those technology things that we've been using it for multiple different things in our data science work. Guess what we did also? We had this beautiful thing called Trident that will connect all the way to the Jupyter notebooks. Hey, throw it into the mix. Now the data scientist doesn't even need to understand what ONTAP is. So we said, okay, how about we let you do all this cloning and a snapshot from Jupyter notebook? And they were like, bingo. They said, listen, you guys put us in a room to understand all this, but we don't believe that data scientists want to learn any of these. So actually, that's been a very big eye opener for us. Especially, I'll tell you, the cloud sync piece, man. Taking data from S3 NFS CIFS, any of them, into S3 and NFS CIFS, and helping the data scientists do that from like a single console now with the BlueXP, that's like hilarious. And that is what is, and that comes, this is the slide I'm talking about. Data scientists, they have cloud native tools. They have their own native tools. And most famous is one of them is Jupyter Notebooks, right? Even like looking at what ChatGPT today with their API with Jupyter Notebook, and everyone is doing it on Jupyter Notebooks. So today, data scientists are using our technology in multiple different industries to actually clone their data sets, share it with another data scientist, whether they are in Minnesota, whether they are in Europe, whether they are in Middle East, wherever they are, in a matter of seconds on the Jupyter Notebook themselves, cloning it multiple times, snapshotting it, putting it away so they can come back to it and reproduce their models. Other thing we haven't talked about, Nick, is traceability. Yeah. Which is another big thing. If you snapshot and clone, you can trace back to those models and figure out like what went wrong. Because right now, if a data scientist trained a model on a certain data set and they left the company after a year, another data scientist comes into the picture and says, well, there was something here, I want to figure it out, whether it's in the model, whether it's in the code, whether it's in the data. How do I make sure which data was used to train this model? They used to have spreadsheets and hanging from the wall. Now with this technology, with snapshots, they just do this instantaneously and without, again, for them learning how NetApp or ONTAP works. And the beauty of it could work in the core, it could work in the cloud or wherever they want.
Wow. So
we came up with NetApp AI Control Plane. There's a lot of videos around it. A very fine gentleman called Mike Oglesby. Grab him if you want to learn more about how this works and you want You want him to showcase this to you in a demo. He just actually published a video where I want everyone to go and look. We are using Flex Cache now to burst data into the cloud and make a hybrid cloud, AI training. Again, we're using a technology that was used in the past for other purposes and repurposing it to be used in the world of data science. And we're not creating a rocket science here. So again, we're always thinking on different ways to use our current technology to help all these different new workloads that come into the play.
Yeah.
A couple of things to cover here before we get into the finish line here. One of the things I mentioned before is actually that healthcare customer that I was talking to you about in EMEA. I asked him very honestly, I said, what was the difference between when you were doing this work without NetApp and after NetApp? He said the fact that I can pull that data 10 times faster into my GPUs, and it's not training it faster, it's pulling it from the source, right? Training the GPUs and all that, when we started doing this 5 years ago, every competitor out there in the market, we were competing with each other. I can do it in a millisecond and 2 microseconds. Another would come, I can train my GPUs 98% security, et cetera, et cetera. That's all old news now. Pulling the data is what is taking longer time than training the data, because the GPUs are doing massive parallel work. But if you're not pulling that data fast, that is what is, and pulling it fast is not only the wire speed or the speed of the disks, etc. It's actually the process behind it, right? It takes time for them to get permission to access that data. It's taking time for them to get how to copy that data, etc., etc. So pulling the data is the big thing, not training it on the GPUs. Everyone does that. So what are the infrastructure options that today, if you're listening to this or you're going to listen in the future, and we realize that we need to give multiple options, multiple routes to market for people who want to do this. The first route to market is our ONTAP AI reference architecture. It's with DGX1, DGX2, DGX A100, and we're working on the H100 here in the coming weeks and months. And that is when, DIY. If you're still preferring doing this DIY, we have a lot of great partners, like CDW, WWT in US, and Insight, to name a few of them, right? I don't want to forget anyone, Mark III, etc. And in Europe, we have a lot of others. Again, I don't want to forget anyone. We have a lot of partners that can help you put that together, right, in an integrated solution. And they are very well educated. They have all the certification required from NetApp, from NVIDIA, even the ML ops people on top. Remember, this is not only the GPU and the storage, you put them together and boom, you'll have a AI infrastructure. You'll still have the ML ops piece on top. You might still need some services to connect with all the data that you had previously with this new infrastructure. So that's the DIY approach. And we have built reference architectures, great people out there in our Raleigh and RTP data center from NetApp. They're working on certifying this day and night, Dave Arnett and others. We created also some sort of NVIDIA private cloud with NetApp. What that means is basically we put multiple DGXs together. We put the ONTAP AI reference architecture at Equinix. And we said if a customer doesn't have a data center power space, cooling, and all that, if a customer wants to get access to this infrastructure today, if they don't want to wait, and especially with all this GPT thing, and people will just now run into the shop and buy stuff, but with all the supply chain issues, it's going to take time. What I'm going to tell you is we have this whole ONTAP AI infrastructure with GPUs, with data available today at Equinix for you to access. And it is as a service, and it's pay as you go, right? You don't have to buy the massive amounts upfront. And we have that fully managed. It's setting up in Equinix that you can use it.
Is that part of our Keystone program, or is that something
That's
different?
part of our Keystone from NetApp perspective.
I didn't even know the ONTAP AI solution was included under that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we built this, we built this, it's up and running. People just need to tell us how much GPUs they need. And actually, you'll be amazed by this. We had a customer, and the way we moved that data is we used the, was it the Azure who has the like kind of the data movement piece where you buy that that's something you go and put the data on it and then just move it into the.
Oh, they all have that.
They all have that.
AWS has the Snow family,
The
Snowball,
the
Snowmobile, all that. Yeah.
We actually used one of that. It took us a day, and the data was in Equinix for the customer in a secure fashion and manner. They were.
I think Equinix even has their own as well.
Equinix has their own too.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on if you have a direct link to Equinix data centers, that makes it easier, or et cetera, et cetera. It depends on the situation, right? But I'm giving you an example. Then what we also have is the SuperPod, and we literally very, very specialized, right? And SuperPod is really that big beast and supercomputer that, we see a very, very specific use cases, especially on natural language processing, etc. But we are having. I want to tell you that, the SuperPod is basically a parallel file system in the backend, right? It's the same DGXs. We have had customers who said, "Hey, I want to use a SuperPod," and we sit down with them. They looked at the parallel file system and they said, "Well, I'm not sure if I want to go into the complexity of a parallel file system." And they were very familiar with NFS. They were very familiar with S3, and they also had a cloud piece into it. And actually, we were able to, of course, in collaboration with NVIDIA, we were able to accommodate them on the regular ONTAP AI, and actually it worked perfectly. And we are seeing more and more use cases. I wouldn't say not needing SuperPod, but I would say more and more use cases being accommodated on the ONTAP AI architecture with the speeds and feeds that we have over there. And last piece that I want to talk about is actually the NVIDIA AIE, which is NVIDIA AI Enterprise, which is something they came up with VMware, where you will have your virtualized GPUs access data on a VMware infrastructure, and we certified that. And that is in the work. We have a lot of partners that we're working together. Especially on the ML ops side and the ISVs. Again, one of the differentiators that NetApp is bringing to the table is, and I don't know, have you heard me talking about IOPS and performance at all today? I forgot.
Not yet.
That. I was an SC.
It's a little late to go down those rabbit holes.
And it's not gonna. And it's not. I gotta tell you, the value add that we're bringing is managing the data more than the performance and the IOPS. We can do those. Those have been in the books for many, many years now, but where we are bringing really value add is creating that data fabric across the hybrid clouds and on premises, working with the ML ops people like Domino Data Labs. We have a huge collaboration going on with Domino, huge collaboration going on with Run AI, who is very good at like scheduling the GPUs. If you have thousands of GPUs, you want to schedule them, you want to monitor them, you want to manage them. We have a collaboration with Brightix AI. And
the Iguazio one that we've been working on for a couple of years. I love that one.
Got acquired as well recently.
That's true.
So
screenshot this, guys. If you're looking for someone, if you and your company are looking for someone to work with on an AI solution, this is everybody that works with us, are familiar with our architectures, our hardware products, our stacks, everything to take advantage of this.
And we keep adding, right? If you have any, ML ops provider that you see them, you see them like, accelerating in some sort areas or specific industries, let us know and reach out to me, and we're very open to work, because again, this is a teamwork across multiple layers in the stack, and we're not going to be able to do this on our own. I have to clearly specify that. Last piece is, again, we have a lot of collateral available on NetApp's AI website. Just go out there, scroll through them. And with that, we have some couple of quotes from analysts. And again, I want to just refer on this slide. There are some logos who got acquired recently. So, for example, SFL Scientific is now a Deloitte. I want to just be clear on that logo perspective, and probably I need to update this slide as well. And then with that, I just want to say a big thank you for having me, Nick. I don't know if we covered all the things that you wanted to cover.
Rapid fire.
You were right. We could have done another hour here.
No, I think this is a great introduction. I definitely want to have like Mike come back and go over the data ops toolkit, and let's get the Apache Spark guys in here and talk about how to build some Jupyter Notebook. Like I needed to set a foundation first. I wanted to have you on to do that, and basically an excuse to riff with you about GPT. But I definitely want to get to a point where we can start really going into the 201, 301, and deeper levels of this kind of stuff, because I think that there's an opportunity here for I don't want to say normal folks, but I think if you look at like traditional infrastructure folks, they're looking at, do I go to the cloud? Do I hyper focus on one specific area? I want to make sure that everybody knows that ONTAP and NetApp have got you covered with just about anything you need. If you didn't see that partner slide that Hoseb put up there, I think that really highlights for me how interconnected all of those worlds are, whether it's manufacturers and vendors to traditional VARs and resellers to solutions providers and systems integrators. It's there. The ecosystem exists already, but it's still very new.
Yeah.
It's still very budding, and there's a lot of work to do to even scale that to a certain extent. But I definitely want to have more than this conversation about going over it. But we had to put the foundation down before we could put the roof on the house.
You know what I mean? I'm happy to join you again. You know that.
Yeah. And this is a weekly show, so anytime we can have you guys. We can have you and Mike come back and Dave and talk about the ONTAP AI platforms and stuff like that. And so all kinds of stuff that we can talk about around these AI solutions, guys. But Hoseb, thank you very much for that walkthrough. I enjoyed rapping with you about GPT. I don't think that's going to be the last time we do that.
Yeah. So. Well, listen, I covered a lot of topics in the hour here. I just want to shout out every single person within NetApp that has been worked with us on this. I represent all of them on this call. So huge thank you to those who are contributing day and night to this mission.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Hoseb, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll let you go, and
awesome.
We'll see you next time, sir. Take care. All right, guys, that is us for today. Thank you again for joining us here. But before you leave, make sure you head over to netappdiscord.com. Come join us in the community if you're not in there already, or you can just go straight to discord.gg/netapp if you've already got an account. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Make sure you turn your bell on so you got your notifications. We do pre-stage these so you can RSVP to them. We also set them up as events in the Discord community. If you're in there, you can RSVP to them. We stream them into our Discord as YouTube activities as well, where you can live chat with peers. If you had any questions about today, the best place to do it would be to leave them right here in the comments on YouTube, or even better, bring them over to Discord and drop a note into some of our discussion or forum channels, and we can get somebody from NetApp to come in and talk to you about it, or set up a meeting where you can have some one-on-one time with your account team and some of our experts here at NetApp. But until next time, guys, we are every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. NetApp On Air is the name of the show. My name is Nick Howell. My guest today, Mr. Hoseb Dermanilian. I feel like I butcher that every time I say that. Thank you very much again to him. We'll see you guys next Wednesday, where we're going to be talking about some more interesting, really cool stuff. But until then, take care.